Welcome to the Motormouth YouTube channel. I'm Zach.
I'm Andrea.
And we do full-length car reviews each and every week, and we stop halfway through for a segment called Questions, Coffee, and Cars. We spun it off, and we're now at number 84. Did I get it right? 84. How do you get a question in?
Follow along on Instagram at Motormouth_Andrea. Every Sunday morning, I put a post out asking for questions. Zach and I are holding coffees. Once we gather our questions, the post is deleted, and we start the show.
Time now for Questions, Coffee, and Cars.
Your questions from Instagram.
Does a Cadillac XT4 come with a really good sound system? What car has the loudest badass sound system?
Well, we're doing a special road trip to drive the updated XT4 with the new big screen.
Yeah.
We like the XT4 a lot. We're big Cadillac fans, actually. That's going to be when, Andrea?
I think that's in end of June.
End of June. Yeah, we're doing a very special road trip.
We won't say where we're going,
but it's
because it's pretty awesome.
All we can say is
it's in Canada.
It's in Canada, and I'll give you a hint. It's very, 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 very far away from here.
And I've never been.
It's very far.
Yeah.
It's many time zones and a half away.
Yep. We're also going to do a Buick, too.
At the same time.
At the same time. So we're going to do two cars that we can stay a little bit longer
okay,
in
the
the
stereo,
area.
I don't know. It's been a couple of years since we drove it. I don't remember the stereo being a high point, but GM, in my opinion, does some really good stereos.
Well, what's our favorite by far?
Cadillac Escalade.
Yeah, so it's got a 13-speaker AKG sound system.
13? It's more than that. 36.
Sorry, 36.
36.
36.
You got the cheap one, Andrea.
Yeah. No, 36. And it's awesome. Now, this new XT4 has an available 14-speaker AKG sound system. It's $1,010, whether you're in Canada or the US. We think it's worth it. So I'm hoping that our test model that we get in our special location will have that 14-speaker AKG sound system.
They never give us the crappy ones, Andrea.
Never.
They always give us fully loaded. So
all the bells and whistles.
I'm sure it'll be great. I can't wait. Actually, it's one of my favorite places on the planet.
Yeah, and I when we reviewed the previous model XT4, I loved it. I thought it was so great. So I'm sure it's going to handle the same way. It's just going to have all the extras inside.
There's two versions. There's the luxury and there's the sport.
Yeah.
And the sport is the one that we like.
Love your channel. Thank you. Well done. Based on your own driving experiences, if you had to compare the Toyota Camry hybrid versus the Honda Accord hybrid, what would you choose and why?
Based on what?
Just based on our experiences of driving it. So would you go for the Accord hybrid?
If I didn't have to look at the Accord,
Camry hybrid?
If I didn't have to look at the Honda Accord, because that might be the most boring car ever made in the last 5 years.
I like it.
It's so boring. Oh my God, it is just so vanilla. You know, Toyota used to get beaten up for being vanilla and beige.
Yeah.
Now that Accord is the champ.
I don't mind it. I kind of like. I like it. I like it that it's streamlined. I find that
I would say for driving though, Accord wins.
Accord wins. First off, the Accord hybrid is quieter than the Camry hybrid, and even that new one. But I think that Toyota's done a good job with the exterior, especially the sport model of the Camry. You don't think so?
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant Accord.
No.
Oh, no.
No, Camry.
No, the Camry,
It looks good.
The SE and the XSE are really quite sporty, and I think the SE is the real value trim, and that's where it starts in Canada. It's going to be, as sedan sales go, which aren't very good, it's going to be a monster.
It's going to be a monster. However, for me personally, I would take the Accord hybrid because it's just fantastic.
And I think the way it drives is better handling, better power delivery. But why are you buying a hybrid, Andrea?
For fuel economy.
And the Camry wins, hands down. It gets better fuel economy.
It does get better fuel economy, but I like the way it handles, and the Accord hybrid is good enough. I'm dreaming of the day when SUVs are a thing of the past and we're all zipping around in the Civic Si or the GTI. Let's bring fun back to the people. Thoughts? It's just another rant from a fellow enthusiast.
Well, keep dreaming. just to give you perspective.
Oh, man.
Like 15 years ago, speaking of Honda, the Civic was the best-selling vehicle overall. Mm-hmm. And the biggest category of cars in Canada were compact cars. Mm-hmm. That's like 15 years ago.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. Those were your SI days. And then SUVs just took off. And now SUVs and light-duty trucks account for over 85% of the market.
I know.
That means sedans and and cars basically are 15% of the market.
Why do you think we have so many cars? We have SUVs, and then we have fun cars. We have the GTI. We've got
Or an MX-5 Miata for the summer.
MX-5 Miata.
Civic.
I have
We have a
to
Civic.
say, I loved the Civic Type R. I
Yes.
loved it. I loved it. I mean, I'm just so passionate about how a vehicle drives. It just makes me happy when I get into a vehicle.
I wouldn't want it every day. I mean, you could drive it every day, but I wouldn't want it
I would
every
go
day.
for the Integra Type S. That's what I would go for.
I would get an SI.
You would get an SI. There you go.
Actually, you know what, Andrea?
Anyway,
The right answer is always GTI.
Yeah.
It really is the best
Of course, he's
all-around
always
car.
going to say that.
Of
But it is
course.
a good daily driver, the GTI, and it's quite refined and it's fast and it really does a lot well, the GTI.
But I hear your pain with everything being an SUV. But you know
Yeah.
what? That is what the market wants.
That's what people are buying.
85% of the market are trucks and SUVs. And only 15% are cars.
Yeah.
And that number is going to shrink because there's going to be less. I just heard, now I don't know if I read on Automotive News that Malibu production is going to cease at its production facility to make room for the next generation Bolt. But it didn't mention if it was being produced somewhere else still. So that could be yet another victim.
We saw Malibu the other day, and it actually looks pretty good. Malibu.
Our friend was up from LA, and his rental car was a Malibu, and he says, "Hey Zach, that's Howie. Hey Zach, what do you think of the Malibu?" I said, "It's fine. It's good." He goes, "I really like it. I might get one as a second car."
Yeah, he likes it. He likes it. Hi, guys. Love the content. Thank you. My question is, what is preventing other Chinese EVs from entering Canada like we see penetrating the UK, like MG EVs and other low-cost EVs?
Well,
Who wants to start?
I'll just say one thing is technically they have to pass North American crash and roadworthiness tests.
Yeah.
So in order for them to come into just Canada is a very expensive proposition. You need the United States market for sales volume. I'm guessing this is going to be quite a long answer, Andrew, because there's so much to unbox here, and a lot of it comes down to protectionism.
Does it ever?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first off, I want to start off by saying there is a great article by David Booth on driving.ca. And
Our colleague,
good guy. And he really got into the weeds on this. So I just took some of the stuff that he said and streamlined it a bit.
Yeah, but he's also have quotes from people to back up all of this stuff.
So couple things first off. He says that Canada has no defenses in place when it comes to allowing Chinese vehicles into the market.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
So our no defenses for Chinese cars coming into the Canadian market is pretty much like our defenses for our military. We rely on the United States.
We do.
The Canadian military is a frickin' joke. They've let it rot in place, kind of like Infinity did with their cars. That's our Canadian military. But we basically rely on the United States on this.
So the United States does have a 25% tariff in place. Former President Trump brought that in and Biden kept it. So you are not getting a Chinese vehicle into the United States unless you pay a 25% tariff. Now, we also have an agreement with the U.S., Mexico, and Canada.
It's the new NAFTA, right?
That's right. And BYD is building a plant in Mexico. But for BYD to keep the cost down on their electric vehicles, their batteries are coming from China. So if you bring a battery from China, you produce the vehicle in Mexico, that's still not getting into the US because that agreement is really so strict. Like there's so much to that agreement that's not going to work for BYD. Now, BYD did say we're building a plant in Mexico because we're focusing on the Mexican market.
That's a bunch of nonsense. Of course, they're building it as a beachhead to get into the United States.
Yeah.
But back to the point is there is no defense, and we piggyback on the U.S. for this because it's such a big market that you would think the economies of scale would need to be sufficient for BYD BYD to make cars into the U.S. So they could bring some battery production in Mexico or North America.
They could.
But they could also sell cars for the Mexican market and ship them on a train all the way to Canada and sell them here. Are those two markets enough to sustain one factory? I don't know.
And I think that is really the question. I think they want, obviously, the U.S. market, but it's going to be more of a challenge. I also believe that if they did come in and they started cutting costs in Canada, the federal government's going to have to look at that. Like, what about all these other brands that are producing EVs? And they're costly. We all know. Let me just give a couple
I just want to say
quotes.
one quick thing about that. The federal government has invested tens of billions of our tax dollars to build all of these new production facilities for Stellantis, Volkswagen, Honda. And Volvo to make all of these battery factories. If you have a Chinese maker come in and undermine all of that, what happens to all our money?
Yeah, no way. No way. I just don't believe that's going to happen. Here's some quotes from David that I thought were interesting. We have, at least according to the experts I have spoken with, no meaningful tariffs preventing the import of Chinese autos, nor would there seem to be, as in America, any bipartisan support for enacting new ones. According to, again, David, smarter people than I, he says, at least a portion of the current Liberal government would seem willing to sacrifice our domestic auto industry if it meant getting more EVs on our roads, be they Chinese or otherwise. And just for a little icing on the cake, BYD's EVs would immediately qualify for the federal rebate of $5,000, whether they're built in China or Mexico.
Well, it's exactly like VinFast. I mean, the VinFast...
Even Tesla.
And Tesla. Yeah. VinFast cars come into Canada and they get a $5,000 tax rebate. They're not penalizing them from the source.
Yeah.
And Teslas, a lot of people don't know this, that the vast majority of the Teslas that are sold in Canada, in Vancouver, is a massive market for Tesla, are made in China.
I know.
They're not going to the U.S. because they don't qualify under the new NAFTA.
They've got to have their own factory.
They're being sold into Canada and probably to Mexico as well.
Yep.
Because they're much cheaper to make in China. So this is one thing where I think that, I've said this before, I don't live in an ideology, I live in reality.
Yeah.
The ideology is electric cars on the road, as many as you can for everybody, that's the goal. And the reality is, we have major manufacturing facilities in Canada. Toyota's the biggest. Honda's going to be very big. They've made a massive announcement for new plants.
Yep.
We're building a huge factory in St. Thomas, Ontario for the Volkswagen battery factory that's going to supply batteries for the entire world for the Volkswagen group. So that's the reality. And if our federal government thinks that they can play both sides, which they do on a lot of things, there's an election coming up and it will have consequences.
Oh, it will have consequences. Here's something interesting I found out from Reuters, which I didn't know. Maybe you know. Maybe Zach knows. At this time, according to Reuters, about 20 Chinese automakers now sell cars in Mexico, but none have a plant in the country. Chinese vehicles constitute about a third of the total brand offerings in Mexico. But in saying all that, Mexico is getting pressure from the U.S. government to keep Chinese automakers out of the free trade zone established under NAFTA.
Okay, so they call it the Great Wall. It is called the Great Wall of China.
Yeah.
There's going to be a Great Wall of North America. And I think if Trump is elected in the United States in the fall, but I would suspect if he gets in again, and that's not up to us, that's up to our neighbors south of here, that if he gets in, he might try to put up a fortress around North America for EVs, because he's got Ford, GM, Stellantis, and all these other brands that make cars here. And it's a big problem in Europe. They haven't been able to do it in Europe, and they're paying a massive penalty for that.
And I believe that the United States will put pressure on Canada as well.
Of course.
This is not going to fly here either. Best YouTube channel. Thank you. Love the chemistry between you two. And this Questions, Coffee, and Cars segment rocks. Thanks. Given the EV market is slowing compared to expectations, I see a lot of deals now on non-Tesla brand EVs. Skeptical side of me tells me to wait and watch and or play it safe with a plug-in hybrid. There are 7 RAV4 Primes in stock at my San Diego Toyota dealership and 5 more in transit. Flip side, I think that California has good EV infrastructure. What do you recommend? Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of Primes that you have there. We can't get any here.
Well, they're starting to come. Obviously, they've improved production, and you're right. We've seen, I just read an article, again on Automotive News, I love that site, is that Tesla is now dropped down from the #1 sales position in California. It's now Toyota. Yeah. And hybrids are moving ahead of the EV sales from Tesla, not all brands. But that is having impact. And it all comes down to interest rates. People are just not willing to spend a ton on technology that is, depreciation's a huge one.
Yeah, depreciation's a big one. Used EVs are depreciating 10 times faster than gas models. There's a new study out. Google it. It's all over the internet.
So CNBC, the business channel, on their website, go EV sales depreciation, you'll find the article.
However, newer EVs with longer range offerings are holding their value better than the ones in the used car market. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here, because some people can only get into an EV in the used car market. And then if these newer ones with longer range are holding their value better, it might be a little bit more difficult. However, in the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act, they do have a $4,000 subsidy for used EVs in the market. So that may help balance the cost if they're holding their value a bit better, the newer ones.
So we hit on this all the time, and somebody actually wrote the other day, why do you keep on talking about depreciation? Yeah. It is the #1 cost of owning a car. Yeah. You spend this amount to buy it, and then you sell it for this amount. That difference is the biggest cost of owning the car, bigger than anything else. So cars that hold their value are better for your pocketbook in the long run. So people just look at, I got to put gas in it, or I got to put electricity in it. That's all they look at the upfront cost. Yeah. But the long term is depreciation. And I would suspect that a RAV4 Prime plug-in will hold its value.
Interestingly enough, this particular study examined more than 9 million car listings at over 60,000 dealerships between 2016 and 2022. It found that older battery electric vehicles and PHEVs, which is interesting, with short driving ranges depreciated faster than gas and hybrid models. But guess what? There was one exception, and that is Tesla, whose older battery EVs held their value better.
Well, they held their value better, but that was 2022 when the prices of their cars was much, much higher. And you got to remember, up to 2022, vehicles like the Volvo XC90 and the BMW X5, they only had like 18 miles of range or 30 kilometers. Like those older ones, I wouldn't even look at them. And I can understand why they have no resale value. So we're in this cycle, this replacement cycle. That's one of the other problems, is you're going to buy something now and it's going to be obsolete in a few years.
And I think the plug-in hybrid versus EV, you're asking about it. Yeah, the RAV4 Prime is always going to hold its value. It's the one that has the most range in the non-luxury category, 68 kilometers, 42 miles. But it depends how you drive. Can you stay within that EV range daily? That's where you're going to see your most benefits, that you can charge with a level 1 or level 2 charger every night. So I think it also comes down to driving habits as well. Hi, love your show. Thank you. I'm moving on from my Volvo S60 and would like an SUV. Top 4 right now are the 2024 Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus, 2022 to 24 CPO Infiniti QX55 Essential, and then he has in brackets CVT issues, 22 to 24 CPO Audi Q5 Sportback, and 2022 to 2024 CPO Volvo XC60 B5. Mainly care about available tech, comfort, and reliability. Wade from San Diego.
Well, I would take the Infiniti off the list right away. It's got old tech in the dash. It's got a continuously variable transmission. Take that one off the list. You might be the best deal.
Yeah, I would get that one. CX-50, I like the CX-50 for its driving dynamics, but the seats are so firm. I'm not sure I could live with that every day.
You know what? The Volvo dealer is going to come like this. When you pull up in your S60, they're going to go, welcome back to the family.
Yeah.
Come on in. And their new technology is, or it depends what year it is.
He said 2022 to 2024.
Okay, so if that's new,
yeah.
it's the new head unit.
Google.
And of course it's upgradable, so it would have the latest software updates to it. So that's the Google Automotive System. I'm not a huge fan of it. Andrew doesn't mind it, but I would say go back to the arms of Volvo.
And you own a Volvo, how comfortable the seats are, how comfortable the interior is, the materials that are used. Out of all of them, I would do the same. I'd go XC60.
And the motor is great. I mean, it's got good power. You could even go for a plug-in if you wanted, if you wanted to try that out. But yeah, I think that you're used to Volvo. You know, we talked about it earlier about people getting out of sedans and into SUVs.
There's
a perfect example.
Yep.
Let's split the difference. Get a V60 station wagon. Now that is cool.
But he wants an SUV.
Get the V60 station wagon. Way cooler. You'll have way more street cred with that.
That's it for us. Thanks for watching. If you want to get a question in, follow along on Instagram at motormouth_Andrea. Every Sunday morning, I put a post out with Zach and I holding coffees, asking for questions. Once we gather our questions, the post is deleted and we start the show.